Welcome to Sew and Tell, where sewists from fashion, theater, and indie sewing bring their different perspectives to the hottest topics in the sewing community. I'm Kate Zaynard.
I'm Meg Healy.
And I'm Amanda Carestio. Today on the podcast, we are talking about passing our love of sewing on to the next generation as moms, as aunts, as sewing instructors, and all of our various capacities. We'll discuss fun first sewing tasks and then welcome special guest Regena Carlevaro from Genome to talk about next steps in sewing. From there, we'll each share a little something in our SewJo segment, and we'll ask you to share something too. But before we jump in, how's everyone doing?
Pretty good. We're recording on Friday this week instead of Monday next week, so I'm pretty excited to be almost done with my week. How about you guys?
It's been a long week. But it's been a good one.
But I'll be working all weekend, but it'll be fun work because we're filming Style Revive Season 2, which will be super fun because my lovely husband, Julian, is the one that films it. It's just kind of, the way, our banter back and forth and kind of the whole vibe of it. And he's back to work. And so we can only film on weekends because I was telling him, I was like, well, maybe we could get someone else. He goes, no, I want to do it. And he had so much fun the first time.
I love that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so right after the recording, I'm headed to the thrift store because they were closed when I filmed season 1. So we're going to do some fun little shoots and stuff this evening. So I'm super, super excited.
That'll be so fun.
Yeah.
Meg, can I make a confession?
Yes, please do.
Some days when I'm just not feeling it, I go to our little place where we store our various images and videos and things to your Style Revive folder and just look at that picture of Bunny sitting there twitching her nose.
Oh, I love
I'm sorry, not
that.
Bunny, Furry. I'm so sorry.
Furry. Oh,
but yes, and I just sit there and I'm like,
we do that.
Oh, Bunny.
And in season 2, we have Bubbly now, so we have 2 bunnies in season
Twice
2.
the bunny fun.
It's so exciting.
Yeah. So I know I often rewatch that video all the time because their wiggly little nose. I can see her right now sitting on the couch looking at me, wiggling her little nose. So
she knows you're talking about her.
She does. She does.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and jump in then, you guys. And Kate, I believe you had something you wanted to discuss first before we hop into the full episode.
Yep. So before we get started with our main segment, I want to address a piece of feedback we received about the last episode. A listener wrote to us and said, really disappointed to hear one of you sewists say in your most recent podcast that you had to have a certain body type to pull off that look. That is body shaming. It is rude. And I'm saddened to hear that anyone in a sewing podcast would think and share that view. So I was the one who said that, and I do want to apologize. It was completely inappropriate. We were talking about the slinky trend, and I was coming from a place where I, personally, with my body shape, would feel both extremely physically uncomfortable and extremely unattractive wearing that style. But I should not have projected those feelings about my own body onto other people. If you like the style and it makes you feel good to wear it, you should wear it and wear it with pride. We all struggle with our own body issues, I think, and as much as I try to be body positive, I do fail sometimes. But that's not an excuse. So again, I apologize for what I said, and I hope that you'll forgive me and be patient with me as I learn to do better.
Thanks for sharing that, Kate. I think that, those kinds of things, they just run deep. Those kind of lessons and things and ways that we think about our bodies, those lessons start early and they, I said, they run deep. And I've definitely, in our conversations on the podcast, had things slip out that I was surprised by. And I think it was also a moment when we were talking about a trend and assessing it. And so I just want to say thank you for sharing that. I think we all have work to do on that front. So,
and it's always good to, acknowledge and look back on, yourself and be like, apologize and, just move forward. And thank you so much, Kate, for sharing. That was, I know definitely me. I've definitely said things about my body and stuff. And it's a tricky subject, and it's hard.
For sure. Maybe it's time to put another body positive episode on the list.
I was just thinking that because there's so much fodder there for good conversation, and particularly in sewing, and particularly as it kind of relates to what we'll be talking about today, which is really kind of passing this craft that we love so much, that we're passionate about, onto the next generation. And I definitely think that sewing has taught me so much about my body and has made me so much more body positive and just body aware and accepting. And that's definitely part of what I hope to share with the next generation, including my daughter. So let's jump in. I think this episode will actually air in October, but September is National Sewing Month. And that's a month when I always think about kind of sewing in the bigger picture. And in particular, thinking about the next generation of sewists who will be coming after us. I think it's something that I think about as a professional working within this industry, but also as a mom and a passionate sewist who cares very much about sewing and the sewing community, and seeing that continue on. So we're going to kick things off today talking about kind of those early years, those first sewing related tasks that maybe you remember, Kate and Meg, as a sewist, and then thinking about ways that we can get younger people excited about sewing, and really thinking about much younger kiddos. So probably like 6 and 7 and younger. So think back to those years. Maybe if you had any experience, if you had any people sewing around you, doing a little bit of time traveling. So my first question is, what is your earliest sewing memory?
I think that for me, and I'm sitting here looking at our outline, and you actually say sewing related memory on the outline.
Yeah. Anything related to sewing.
I think for me, it was it was going through my mom's sewing box. She had a box of just various supplies, not like I have a sewing box and it's a disaster full of mostly cross-stitch stuff. Actually, I have, I think, 2 of those, but she had, one that was for like mending, and also held her extra things for when she was working on the machine. And so, I'd go in there and I'd look at the buttons and the safety pins, and I don't even remember what else except for this one tool, which just fascinated me because it was like this little tiny crochet hook on one end, but it was really long and thin and had a ring at the end. And I now understand that it was a object for pulling a drawstring through a casing. You feed it through, and then you hook the drawstring onto the little crochet hook at the end, and you pull it back through, and it had the little wiggly hinged thing that would close up so that your hook didn't get caught as you were anyway. Fascinated by that. I just, it's so clear in my mind how fascinating it was. So So I really do. I think that's
just a quick before my thought goes away. Just a funny story about how that tool is so multi-purpose. Julian's the vacuum got clogged, and guess what? Unclogged it. That
that is awesome.
So if anyone has a clogged like vacuum, that was it like hooked around like the linted, like felted together, and it pulled. So I just wanted to say that before I forgot, as that's just so funny. I totally forgot about that until you mentioned that, but that's so
handy.
Well, and I don't have one of those tools, and I feel like I need to figure out where I can get one, because I used to sit there and look at it, and I was so fascinated, and I don't have one, and I find that ridiculous, because why am I not using that instead of a safety pin to pull my elastic through things? So anyway, that's going on my Christmas list.
Oh, totally.
How about you, Meg? What's your first sewing related memory?
I was actually trying to think, because I was thinking, you know what, it was me like starting sewing paper when I started sewing lessons. And then I was thinking back, I was like, sewing related memory. It was when I was little, and I would go over to my my grandma's house, and she had a little sewing, and it was just me like poking around, like opening things, and just that's totally it. And just she would sew like my doll's clothes and stuff like that, and I guess that was just kind of poking around, and so cool. And then totally that little signature sewing box. My mom still has that exact same one, and it has the exact same like buttons and like tiny like thread that you get from hotels in it. And even now when I go back home, it's me reaching for it. And she goes, I have all these buttons that you need to sew. So I still have, now it's me reaching for the box.
Right.
Yeah.
So funny. I think that I probably did a little bit of exploring in my mom's sewing box. There's just so much to look at, so many fun tools and threads and buttons.
Actually, when you don't know what they are, exactly. You just want to touch everything.
It's like a treasure box.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember, I was probably a little bit older. I was probably maybe like 4. And I remember my mom would sew like on the weekends and stuff, and she would set up her sewing machine at the kitchen table. And I remember she would be working with a pattern, and I think she was making me a dress. And I remember sitting with her while she tried to figure out this pocket. It was a patch pocket, but it had this little piece that folded over and tied in a bow that was part of the pocket. It was kind of like just a little decoration on the top, but you kind of sewed it all together. And I remember that she was just stumped by how this went together. And I remember just sitting there with her, like watching her try to figure it out, and then eventually, figure out how it was supposed to be sewn on. But I think from there, probably a little bit later, like I feel like I was around sewing a bunch when I was in that age range, like that 4 to 6 age range, and then came back to it. My mom was no longer sewing, but I came back to it when I was probably like 14 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember making some really fun little purses. And I know I've told this story before, but I definitely spent a lot of time making outfits for my troll dolls.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
So fun.
Can I tell you a story of my first sewing project that I can remember?
Yeah.
I remember trying to sew a little pillow, like a little doll pillow, and it was round because I wasn't I wasn't worrying about square pillows. And I can just remember looking at it, and I was doing hand running stitches that must have been 3/4 of an inch long. They were huge. And I didn't understand about the whole right sides together and turn thing. So it was just all the way around with some stuffing in the middle. And I'm pretty sure I didn't ever figure out how to do a knot. So, and I did that all by myself. There was no assistance. I was just, I'm going to take this piece of fabric I found and make a pillow. So there we go.
Nice.
Meg is laughing at the face I just made, I think.
Oh no! I was thinking about this just brought up a memory when I first went to Julian's parents' house, like right after we met, and in his childhood bedroom, and it's still there to this day. It's the pillow that he made when he was like in grade school, and he goes. And I remember the first thing he said, he goes, I made this pillow, Meg. And it's so funny. And it's quilted pillow. And it is stuffed to the it's so, like he overstuffed it so hard. And it's still there. And so when we go there, he always like, it's my little pillow that I made. And he quilts it. And it's all, all the corners are mismatched and stuff. But it's cute.
When I was I'm sorry. I swear we'll move on after this. I swear.
Yeah.
When I was in
love early sewing memories.
I know, nice. Right? When I was in middle school, and we were doing basically home ec. The only thing we sewed was pillows, and it was a lot of hand sewing. And one of them was actually coloring. We just got square pillows with something printed on them, and we'd sit there with fabric markers and color them in.
Oh, that's cool.
So it was fun, but I'm not sure it was really great for educating you on how to sew. But we won't go into that in great detail. But my husband, who went to the same middle school that I did 4 years previous, he actually made a little duffel bag. And he still has it. It's teeny tiny, but he still has it, and it is a functional duffel bag, and he takes it with him when he goes camping and stuff. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, why did they move to pillows by the time I got there? I mean, why didn't I learn the basics of stitching a duffel bag? It's not complicated. It's not like anything fancy. I don't think it has a zipper even. But I'm just sitting here like, what died in the curriculum between when he was there and I was there? Okay, I'm done. Thank you. We can move on.
Probably the funding.
Yes, that probably was it.
All right. So jumping back in, see trips down memory lane.
Yeah.
So fun. Next question is, have you ever taught a kid or a young person to sew?
I have not. I occasionally help other people, mostly Mark, when they have questions, but I've never sat down and been like, okay, this is how you thread a machine. This is how you put together a pattern. This is how you XYZ.
What about you, Meg? I know you have a ton of instruction experience in sewing.
Yeah, I've never dealt with teaching any children to sew. It's all adult, like my friends and Julian, and even when I had like my would do some teaching at sewing events, and it's all adults. Yeah, but I always find some of my friends and Julian are just like teaching kids. Oh, it's so funny. But Julian's actually his little cousin. She's just getting into high school, and I think she's expressing some interest in learning how to sew. So I might set up some times that I can help her. Maybe once we can kind of get back to physically together again for sure. So yeah.
Yeah, I keep dropping hints at my niece, but she's not interested.
No.
I tried that too. My niece was here over the summer, and she's 21, and it was tough. I think it's and I have failed largely teaching my daughter to sew because it's really hard. It's really a different way of thinking about sewing. I have shared on the podcast before that I purchased a little machine for my daughter. I think it was her Christmas when she was 4 years old. I mean, it was really way too young, but I was really excited. I had big plans of us, me teaching her and us sewing together and it being beautiful and amazing. And every time we've tried since, it's not ended in tears, but it's devolved pretty quickly. So that's definitely on my list. But I wondered, and I know all of us kind of have some sewing instruction experience, and I wondered when you have kind of helped someone to sew or taught someone or, whatever level they're at, what are your words of wisdom that you have picked up along the way?
Huh.
I think
for me, go ahead, Kate.
No, I was just going to say, I think what I wish somebody had told me when I was first learning to sew, and so what I would be sure to tell anybody else, and I know I've told you guys this, you've all heard this before, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be totally exact. I mean, obviously you don't want it going off by huge amounts or anything, but it doesn't have to be every stitch exactly where it needs to be. It doesn't, I mean, your edges are going to raffle a little bit, and you might not be able to keep your seam completely and totally straight. I still never sew my seams completely and totally straight. Because I always I'm shifting my hand and something goes weird, and that's okay. It's small. It's tiny. Nobody's ever going to notice those sort of things. So that would be kind of my thing, is that there are certain things that you need to do that to basically to sew right. I mean, you need to remember to press your seams. You can't skip that step with any regularity, because that's going to really mess up your quality. And you've got to make sure that there's thread in your bobbin, certain little things like that. But things don't have to be so perfect that a little mistake here and there isn't, okay. And even if you have to rip out a seam, that's okay. Everybody has to rip out seams sometimes.
Yeah, that's part of the process.
One of the things, I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on a mini tangent again. One of the things that really strikes me, almost every time I edit one of our Meet the Maker features, one of our questions in that feature is, what is your most important tool? And at least half the people say it's a seam ripper. And these are professionals who have been doing this for years. A seam ripper is important. Everybody needs a seam ripper. Everybody has to fix mistakes. It's just part of the process. And letting it get to you is not the best way to enjoy doing your thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think for that reason, it's kind of a good activity for little kids, because I think little kids, in my experience, at least my kiddos, around that 5 to 6 range, they're still very focused on perfection. They don't want to do it unless they know they're going to do it perfectly. They don't want to do it unless they know they're going to get it right. There's a lot of anxiety around that. And I feel like sewing is actually pretty good for that, because it's so, it is so forgiving. And it is one of those crafts where you learn pretty early on that the seam ripper is your friend and perfection isn't the goal.
Mm-hmm. And that even when you make a huge mistake, you just go with Meg's motto and make it work.
Make it work. Yeah, what I do even when I do eventually, maybe teach some kids, and as we get older, all my my friends are having children now, and my one friend that my golfing friend, she has a little 3-year-old, and she's so interested in sewing, and she wants to get her interested in, and her herself want to learn how to sew. So I keep saying, I'll come over and teach you both at the same time, because they got a sewing machine. So But my thing is, like, I don't like to go with like wisdom or like, all right, this is how it's done. I just give so much encouragement. Like, even when you just sew a seam, I go, look at that. Wow. Like, that's perfect. Like, look, see how easy that was? Or they sew something, they try to go, oh my gosh, can you believe you made that? And they're like, everyone just have a smile, and I'm just so encouraging. That's what my friends always tell me. They love when I'm around sewing, because I get so enthusiastic. I'm like, look what you did. Wow. Like,
I imagine that's how you are with Julian. Is that how you are with Julian?
Yes. And he has a big smile on her face. I'm like, wow, that's perfect. He goes, really? I'm like, yeah, look, it's not that hard. I always say, see, it's not that hard. Like, I think everyone thinks it's so intimidating. And after everything I do, see, that wasn't that hard. Now, just picture you sewed that one seam, and then you just sew 4 again, and then you have like a garment, and it's easy. So I just give so much encouragement and just enthusiasm. So that's what I do.
I like that approach.
I'm sorry for my neighbors. They probably, when I have my girlfriends over, so it must be so loud.
Awesome. I love that. Well, I think those were very awesome words of wisdom. So thanks for sharing. We have a blog on the Sew Daily site that has a listing. I put together a listing actually of 6 or 7 activities that are really just kind of base level sewing activities for kids to get started. And that was actually something that I worked on right at the beginning of the pandemic and the quarantine. And I have, those are all kid tested and kid approved, but I just wanted to kind of talk through them really quickly. And there are things that we've already discussed a little bit in just the ways that we got started. And one is really scrap play, like thinking about my youngest, who is 4. He would totally get interested in a big pile of scraps and seeing what he could make with those. I think for a little older kid, thinking about fun doll clothes, or in our case, at our house, we make dinosaur clothes for Christmas and create little outfits for them. And both my sons and my daughter all get into that. And I think that's actually, you learn a lot when you are making something, even for a doll, about how things have to work the three-dimensional nature of things, how things have to kind of go around a body, even if it's a dinosaur. I think, even though those are, experimental and fun, I think that you actually do learn a lot as a kid just getting started. One other thing,
it's like real basic draping, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Even on those early years working with my troll doll, I was draping gowns for her. One other quick task too to think about getting comfortable with needle and thread is beading. So using needle and thread to bead, to string beads, I think is a really good skill for that, early eye-hand coordination, which translates really quickly into buttons. My daughter loves buttons. I think she gets it from me. She loves
whatever she got.
Yeah, exactly. digging through vintage buttons with her mom. Loves sewing buttons on. I think that's a really fun, and that's also, I think, beading and using buttons, sewing on buttons is a very quick kind of instant gratification thing. Whereas, other tasks take a little bit of time for it to look like anything. A button looks like a button sewn on a piece of fabric really quickly. And I think for kids who have shorter attention spans and need that kind of instant aha moment, buttons are a really good place to start. One thing that my daughter got really into from this list was just simple hand embroidery. So just hooping some fabric. We wrote her name in a little friction pin, and she traced the letters of her name and asked to do that over and over and over again. Aww. She was really into it. And I think that was, that's again, it's hand sewing, but I think there's just kind of getting used to controlling the direction of the needle and the length of the stitches and all of that, going around a curve. It's a really good early step. And when we eventually go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, if you're planning on doing mostly machine sewing, it's always good to have that needle and thread hand-eye coordination, because you're always going to need to tack down a facing. Maybe you want to hand stitch your hem. Maybe you have buttons you need to sew on. It's always good to practice with that sort of thing.
Is there any safety precautions when teaching kids with the sharp needle and sewing through fingers and stuff? I'm just and scissors and stuff. I'm not not around enough kids to know what they should and shouldn't have to play with and the ages and stuff. Is that ever a consideration?
I think so. I mean, I think it really depends on the kid, especially with scissors. I feel like different kids get used to scissors at different rates. And so I think it really depends on the kid. And, I was thinking about needles, and I do think that's a really good, I
poke
point.
Myself all the time.
I know. Well, I mean, it's a good lesson before you move to the machine to respect the needle,
right? Yeah.
Because it's sharp and it can cause damage.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a good lesson to learn.
Little hands are a lot easier to get under a sewing machine needle than big hands.
Right. It's the little foot.
It's true. It's true. Mm-hmm. And when we eventually dust off my daughter's super cute purple sewing machine, I think we're going to do some really easy machine piecing. Yeah. Because I feel like that's a really good way, that's a big jump. But when you're machine piecing, you're largely talking about straight lines, and you can really learn about seam allowance and before you jump into an actual project. And I feel like you can do strips and strips and strips pretty easily, and then, turn that into something, or not, just have it be really good practice for your first time on the machine. Mm-hmm. Any other kind of first tasks you would add to that list?
I mean, obviously, I'm a fan of pillows. Clearly,
pillows,
and I do think that pillows are. I mean, they're not the most interesting thing. You don't want to make 17 of them, but for a first project, I think they're pretty solid, because they're just a few seams. Turn it inside out, stuff it, and it's hey, look, you just made a pillow. And I think that's pretty. It's quick and it's gratifying. Mm-hmm. So that's
and
kind
even
of
masks. It's
kind
of Yeah, because if maybe it would encourage them to, wear them more. They have to wear them going to school now, I think even in Canada. So maybe they would get more excited about making their own mask to wear it. Just like obviously you can like double check to make sure it is like, there's not any holes that would, or, with any safety precautions. But yeah, or even just just paper. You don't have the frustration of the needle, like just stitching lines down like a gridded piece of paper just to get the feel and then nothing's threaded. So I didn't sew. When I first sat down on a sewing machine, paper was the first thing that I got, just to get the needle used to the hole. And then you do one that's like a curve and you learn pivots and then you move on to thread and fabric. That's how I personally, when I was younger.
Got it. So the machine wasn't even threaded.
No. It wasn't even threaded. Yeah. It was just the needle. And I do that smart. When my friends come over too. I print off. I just, I think I have a template that's I include in the Berta certification course, and it's various lines and then you do different stitch lengths. And so that may be more for advanced, like when you're an adult learning to sew, you test out like when it gets larger or smaller, but maybe it's just, getting, the feel for it and not having to worry about bobbin threads and all the stuff. I don't know.
I think that might depend a little bit on age, honestly, because I know some kids who might get real sick of stitching holes in paper real fast.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah.
But I think that's a great idea, though. I mean, paper, endlessly easier to manipulate than fabric. Especially for those young hands. So that's a great idea, Meg. I'll add that to the list of things to try once we dust off the machine.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to think about for next steps. We've got another list of kind of first, like if you've got an older kid who does have a little bit of sewing experience, maybe they've made a pillow or a mask, and they're ready to hop into an actual first project. We have a list of recommendations for that, and I'll include that in the show notes page, because I'm fairly certain my daughter just wants to hop, she wants to skip all the intermediate steps and just hop into fancy evening wear. And I'm not really even sure how to approach that, because I know she's got big dreams and big aspirations. So it's hard for her to take those small incremental steps, but I think important as well.
Yeah.
And also, speaking of next steps, we are going to take a quick break here, and then we are going to hear from our special guest, Janome educator Regena Carlevaro, who's going to share some additional ideas for getting slightly older kids sewing, taking those next steps, carving out time for teaching kids to sew. Lots of good stuff in the next segment. We are so excited to welcome Regena Carlevaro back to Sew and Tell. If you remember, Regena works as an educator for Janome, and she joined us a few months ago for a discussion about beginner and beyond sewing machines with some super helpful information. We've already discussed a little bit about kind of those first steps in sewing for kids to take, but we're happy to have Regena on to kind of discuss some next step options for kids when they're ready to do something a little bit more formal. So, Regena, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me back. I really enjoyed my time with you last time, so I'm looking forward to visiting with you again.
Let's jump in. First, I wanted to start with a discussion of the Quilt Cadets program by Latifa Safir that Janome is currently supporting. And Regena, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how that program works. It sounds terrific.
It's absolutely awesome. The first time Latifa showed the idea to me a couple years ago at Houston Quilt Market, I got goosebumps because it's like Girl Scouts on steroids, but for sewing only. And it's fabulous. She's so creative and she's so passionate about getting young people sewing. And so she created these patterns, and she was very mindful about how kids think and what would get them excited. And so she designed these patterns so that they're skill building. So you learn something as you make this one project, and very well illustrated, great pointers at the beginning about, hey, if you're a beginner, you need to have your adult there to help you learn how to use the scissors correctly. But in each pattern, not only does she skill build and help the kids learn new sewing skills that won't just equate to quilting, but to the whole world of sewing, and opens it all up to them. But each pattern has a prize in it, kind of like Cracker Jacks. But also they can earn badges. So the first time they use a scissor correctly, there's a badge for that. The first time they sew something that's got a curve to it, there's a badge for it. First time they insert a zipper, a badge. So you get the idea. And so kids love that idea of collecting those badges to help show, their journey. I know my daughters, when they were in Girl Scouts, they love that. They couldn't wait to earn a new badge. So I, could sew it on their vest. So it's that same philosophy, but they're skill building, learning how to sew, first with some parental supervision, but as they go, they get better and stronger and more confident. So not only do they have the badges to show for it, but they also have that inner confidence of learning how to make something from beginning to end.
I love that so much. First, I want some sewing badges just for myself.
Thinking that too.
Anytime I insert a zipper or do a buttonhole, like I need it.
I agree.
Yeah. And second, I just wanted to say the projects are so cute. There are some really adorable brekkie bags. There's like toast there's a Pop-Tart. There's waffle, some really cute themed enchanted travel pillows. The unicorn is absolutely adorable.
I love the one pillow pattern where they can actually personalize the parts of the face. So they can bring pick the eyes they want, the nose, the mouth, the hair. And so they can personalize the pillow to look like them.
Oh, I love that.
So, it's just that next level, because it also is teaching them how to plan. Mm-hmm. And when you learn that, and learning how to sew, I think that's what makes the best problem solvers in the world. And so, if we can get all these young people planning ahead, making something, then, just that confidence building in them. And it's just, I just love it. I just can't say enough about it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I love that. It's like, I love that customization angle too, because I think my daughter's probably a little bit young for this program, although I want to dive into that a little bit, but she is all about customization. I think, so I love that. It's like you learn the rules, but there's also a little bit of experimentation, making it your own. It's a little less rigid, maybe a little bit more fun. I think that's such a good approach.
And I think that's the key factor in this.
Right.
I know so many people who got turned off from sewing when they were in grade school or, middle school, high school, because the rules were so stringent. So I think the ability to mentor these young people and encourage that creative streak. From my experience, when I used to teach kids how to sew in the store that I managed, my guidelines were pretty much if they could sit in a chair and their foot could reach the foot control on the floor, they were old enough to join the class. And I took it very carefully with them and, made sure that they were following some very good guidelines and rules about safety and scissors and pins and where their fingers were in relationship to the presser foot. But I noticed something really amazing. They hadn't been told all the rules at that age. So they weren't full of fear.
Yeah.
They weren't afraid of doing things wrong, and they were fearless. And I found, on a regular basis, the younger the kids, the less fear they had and the more creativity they had. And the young kids would walk out of those classes with the most embellished project of anybody because they were like, oh, let me try this. Oh, right. I want to sew a button on for the nose. I want to, do decorative stitches for this. And I love that because they weren't already told, no, you can't do that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about age range. And I was thinking about the Quilt Cadets program in general, but also kind of that first real project. What are your thoughts on that, Regena?
So I've went through a journey with my own children. Mm-hmm. I think I had mentioned to you on a previous conversation, my son wanted to make a quilt with me. He wanted a new quilt top for his bed. So I went and I looked at all these different kid patterns, very, juvenile looking quilt patterns, thinking, okay, I'm just going to pick out a juvenile quilt pattern and we're going to go from there. I learned from that. That's a huge mistake. You don't buy a pattern that is for kids for, the end result. You find a pattern that's for kids to sew.
Yeah.
So I had my son sitting down at a sewing machine, strip piecing for me. And they were 1.5 inch strips sewn together with a 1/4 inch foot. I had a guide on the machine. And I have to say, for those skinny little strips, he did really, really well. Then I had to subcut those and I had to use those to frame the fussy cut blocks. So if he was a little bit off, I had to really, really, manipulate that fabric to make those fit. And it was not the funnest thing I've ever done. So I learned a lot from that. So, a basic pillow pattern for a kid, maybe a 4-patch if you're a quilter and that's something they would like to do is make a pillow for their bed, or even a pillowcase. Pillowcases are very rectangular, very straight line, very easy to sew. We've taught Girl Scouts in our actual office at Janome how to make pillowcases down to the age of 7. And they loved it. They were so excited to have a pillowcase that they were going to take home and put on their bed. So, that younger age, I think that's really important to make sure it's just straight lines, very simple. And then, moving up, then I brought my daughters in and we made pajama bottoms together. Again, straight lines, but they learn next level skills about how to insert elastic into a waistband, how to hem, a little bit of fitting. And at the end of the day, they had a garment they could wear. And, even though in my mind, it's something you only wear in the house. Well, today, young people wear pajama bottoms at school a lot. So it ended up being something they wore out of the house. But, they got to their first taste of making a garment for themselves. And I would say that age group was around, 10 to 13 in that span. And that worked out really well for them because they start getting interested in fashion and wanting to get into that.
Well, cool. Well, let's talk about that older age group a little bit. And I think, again, like once you've kind of got the sewing basics down, I really think it's fun to show kids how sewing can be, it's something that's very practical, but it's also a really great method for self-expression. And one organization that is doing a lot in that area is the Social Justice Sewing Academy. And I believe, Regina, that Janome is actually working with that organization as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's something we're really proud of. We reached out to the woman who organized the Sewing Justice Social. I always get that. I always call it SJSA.
So call it that for sure.
Yeah. So we reached out to her and we were like, hey, what can we do as a sewing machine company to get involved and to help you and to help promote sewing among young people, especially those who are in inner cities,
right?
Where the home ec and the sewing courses have been taken out of school because they don't have the budget for it. But she's done such a great job with using sewing as a way for these young people to express themselves, whether it's about their social standing or where their place in the world is. And they're doing amazing things. And so we as a company we've become like a congruent for introducing some of our makers and our artisans to them. And SJSA created a program where we can connect our artisans, our makers, people in our sewing community to help mentor a class of young people who are looking to use their art, to use their sewing, to turn it into some type of business opportunity. So taking it from not only just for expression and way of art, but also, hey, you can make a living with this.
Right.
So, so we've already, introduced them to Latifa Safar, who did already teach a class with them. And we have a few more other people that we're connecting them with. And at the end of that program, I believe there are 25 students in that class. At the end of that program, each student is receiving from Janome a $1,000 grant to help them in that startup.
That's so cool.
So, like I said, we're very proud of that because we really want to help them and help promote the sewing of these young people because, at the end of the day, it's really selfish on our part. We're hoping to, it's that full circle, full cycle in the sewing world. We want young people sewing so that it gives back to our business in the long run, and it keeps the sewing industry alive.
And as you were talking, Regena, I was thinking about when we had Bianca Springer on the show, when we were talking about playing with fabric and fabric manipulation. And I was really surprised to hear that she has her kids help her with that and invites them into the studio and they work on that too. And that was really inspiring for me as well, because I think that's, that's a particular side of the craft where, there is no perfection. It's really about experimentation. And that really stuck with me. And I think what you were saying, particularly about body image for girls, and when that becomes, a hard thing, I think about all of the many ways in which sewing has helped me work through some of those issues and learn more about my shape and my body.
Well, and the other thing I think about too is, because when you're in the sewing room, you can think a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. I often, when I'm at quilt shows and people are coming into the booth and they're buying for a young person, it's usually the grandmother with the granddaughter. It's very rarely the mom with the daughter. And it made me start thinking one show, because they were like, no, my mom doesn't sew. It does, And I started wondering, like, is it possible that because, the first generation sewed all the time, that the daughter resented the mom from sewing because she was in the room sewing all the time and not spending the time with her and didn't want to have anything to do with it? Or, is it that, maybe just the mom sewed really terrible clothing and the daughter didn't like it, but who knows? But, I wonder about that and thinking, well, if your child's not feeling included in that hobby, then does it turn them off of it? So, I think that the best practice is, okay, let's invite them in. Not everybody's going to have the propensity to it or the aptitude for it, but you know what? At least give it a shot and see. And even if at a young age they don't, maybe later on they will, because they have that great fond memory of doing something with their mom or their, or their grandma, it could be any combination, but at least it opens up the door.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Regena. I feel like we could talk for about 4 more hours. And,
totally.
But I feel like that was a really lovely conversation, thinking about giving kids some really solid ideas for next steps and working with them and carving time out to spend sharing our love of sewing. It was really, really, really inspiring.
Well, thank you for inviting me here. When this COVID thing is over, we definitely have to get together at some point, have a drink together. I would love that.
Oh, it's on the list. Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, Regena.
Thank you.
Oh, I love chatting with Regena. She's got such good wisdom to share. And I've literally took some notes as we were chatting.
I know. If I have a child, I'm gonna get them on the button train like yours. And
Totally.
I don't have to sew any buttons. I'll be like, oh, here you go.
Yeah, this is practice.
Practice. Oh, okay, they're not straight. Take that one out and read.
Yep, exactly. Well, I have to say that when this episode drops, it will officially be October, and we are having a month-long celebration on Sew Daily for Pants Month. And I am so excited. We've got a lot of stuff going on the site. And this year, I'm always excited about pants. I think pants are one of my favorite things to sew. And in recent years, I've always been excited about Pants Month. But this year, I'm having like a mini personal Pantsapalooza. And that's a lot of P's. I have a lot of pants that I want to sew for fall and winter. And so I'm going to I'll check in, I'll share my progress I'll let you guys know how I get on with things. But I think I've got like probably about 5 pairs that I want to sew.
Wow.
Many of them are elastic waist pants. They're not, but they're not full, fitted, fly front, all of that. But I have some that I need to replace in my wardrobe and some holes that I want to fill going into fall and winter. So Pantsapalooza, Pants Fest, Pantstober.
Nice.
Should be fun.
I went for a walk the other day and I was wearing a pair of jeans with like a button-up fly. When I could not peel those off fast enough and get back in my Nini culottes.
I know.
It was pretty.
I feel ya.
How about you, Kate? What's your SewJo?
All right. Well, in our last episode, I mentioned that I have to sew a wrap dress for an upcoming issue of Sew News, and we're all working on that now, apparently. But I had kind of an epic week and a half because whenever I found some time to start taping together the pattern, my cat would come and lay on it. And then once I had everything cut out finally, and I was trying to cut the pattern pieces out, my cat would come and lay on those. And she really, really loves laying on fabric. She'll roll around on it and bat it with her paws. It's adorable. It is, but it's also very difficult because when you get into the groove and then you have to stop because there's a reason you can't cut anymore, it can be real frustrating. And it turns out I always knew I wasn't a big fan of cutting things, but I hate cutting dresses because they're too big. The pieces are just big and epic and you have to manipulate them. Plus this one was a directional print. And so I couldn't fold. So I had to cut almost everything single layer. And I was very frustrated. So we are eventually getting to the SewJo part, which is yesterday I actually got to start sewing this dress. After all of this cutting and making the pattern and pre-serging, all of this stuff. And it's kind of a little bit more complicated than a lot of the things I sew. I tend to things where it's like 4 seams and you're done, 4 seams a hem and you're done. And this one's a little bit more complicated. It's kind of kimono style, but it's got like open pieces and it's really pretty so far. I'm really liking it. But I kind of forgot how much I enjoy doing those little tiny careful steps because I don't do them very much anymore. And so I was sitting there and I'm like, I should be annoyed by this, but I'm not annoyed by this. I'm actually really enjoying each of these little short seams and this little delicate gathering right across this little part on the raglan seam. And so, I haven't gotten very far because I didn't have that much time to work on it yesterday, but I was really enjoying all of those little steps. And it's actually, the skirt is going to be lined, which is not something I do very often. So I'm kind of looking forward to all of these the elements of doing something a little bit more complicated than normal. So that's kind of what's giving me my SewJo today.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
I was looking, I have my wrap dress cut out and I was looking through the instructions. It's the LOD wrap dress from Closet Core. And the first step is like stay stitching. And I thought to myself, maybe I'll actually do it this time.
I did stay stitch. I never stay stitch, but I did this time.
That's so funny that you say, because I was looking, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it.
I feel like stay stitching gets a badge.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
yes. Totally gets a badge.
Yeah, yes. Stay stitching, definitely. Understitching and stay stitching. Yep.
Unsung heroes.
Yeah.
Well, what about you, Meg? What's your SewJo?
Yeah, well, actually, so last week I was talking about my my Nini culottes, and I've made 2 of them, but I kind of switched plans for one of them. I'm actually wearing the black pair right now, and I made another pair out of this kind of like Flintstone print, like linen. And I got it from Match Point, and I think Blackbird also sold it. But it's so funny that the wrap dress, one of the samples that was sewn for the photography on the Closet Core website is that same fabric.
Oh, really?
Cool.
Yeah. And so I have a pair of Ninis made out of that. And then I realized that my lime green kind of Lysol like twill beautiful fabric, I had just enough to cut a Zadie. So I cut a Zadie out of, so I'm going to have a lime green, and I cut the long sleeve one so it could be a fall. So I have it cut out, and I'm super, super excited. I printed the Zadie maybe about 8 months ago, and I just haven't cut it out yet. And so I have it cut out, so there's no going back, and I'm super excited about it.
Awesome. I love a long sleeve Zadie.
Yes,
I feel like it's just like kind of next level onesie.
Yes.
Love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ooh.
I'm so what?
Can I talk about my idea?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So last week we were talking about how none of us really liked the bubble trend. Mm-hmm. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized that what I really want out of life when it starts to get cold is like a caftan made out of fleece and just like totally cocoon myself, possibly hooded. And then Meg was like, "Oh, you can put fringe on it."
Yeah.
And I was like, yes. So anyway, that's possibly a second SewJo. I'm just waiting for the fleece to go on sale so I can find something ridiculous.
What are those full? What are the fleece blanket things that you wear?
What is it called?
Like a snuggie?
A snuggie, yes.
Yeah.
So you're talking like snuggie, but make it fashion. The picture I've got in my head.
It's not going to be fashion. It's going to be me basically hiding in a blanket when it gets cold out, and I'm still working from home. That's what's going to happen.
I love it.
Yeah. I want a snuggie. Sounds so good.
All right. Since I derailed and did an extra SewJo, I will move us on now. It is now time for our Sew and Tell, where we talk about the things that you told us about our last episode. So last episode, we asked you, what are you sewing for fall, and which fall trends, if any, will you incorporate into your plans? We got some very good responses, so I'm going to have Meg start us off.
Yeah, some really great responses. So first off, we have Fostering Sewing on Instagram, and they said, I'm definitely feeling capes this fall, winter. Mm-hmm. At TrishNewber.com has a great amber Capulet pattern, and at George and Ginger Pattern Co. have a cool Revelry. Sorry. Yep. Yeah, Revelry. Sorry. Add-on that I'm loving and want to try. Ooh, what is a cool Revelry add-on? Now I'm curious.
It must be a pattern.
Yeah. Maybe it's a pattern.
Yeah.
But I love a cape. I think I could definitely see myself incorporating capes back into my wardrobe. It's just so chic.
I responded to this on Instagram, this comment, because I was like, I just didn't even think about capes, because I feel like that's such a good transition piece too. Like it's a great early fall piece. And then it can also be the thing that you wear before you get into your full on snow winter coat. So fun. We also heard from Poplin Peony, who said, and I know Kate picked this one for me. They said, I think I hate them all. Although I might make a fuzzy coat with some fake fur with leopard print I have in my stash, and I would like to make a quilted jacket, but I'm not sure I will actually get to such involved makes this season. And yes, and yes. I'm feeling that. I am feeling very non-committal right now. So I loved what you said, Kate, about enjoying the kind of more detailed steps and processes. I am just not there. I'm like, give me the easy stuff. I think it's just my mood this pandemic,
which is fine. You know what? Yeah, my philosophy is whatever gets you through the pandemic. Yeah, makes you happy. It. I have done really very little sewing this year, especially this summer. All of my planned summer makes, I made like 2 of them. It's kind of ridiculous, and I'm just telling myself it's fine. Save the fabric, do it next year. You're in the middle of a pandemic. You can take a breath and move on with your life.
Indeed.
All right. And we also heard from Christy Makes, who said, I'm making overalls and long sleeve t-shirts. Also a pair of pants or 2. Hoping to make a jacket too. I don't sew many trends. Focus on comfortable, wearable clothing. And that is where I am for this pandemic. I just want to be comfortable. I am really feeling what you said, Meg, about the button-down fly jeans. Like, I had to put on jeans a couple of weeks ago, and I got back from my trip to the doctor or wherever it was, and I'm like, oh God, get it off.
Yeah. I have so many elastic waist pants in my fall. I just want to be comfortable and cozy.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep. All right. So, there's one more thing on this section.
One more thing.
And that's this episode's question. So this episode, we're asking you, how do you bring the kids in your life into your sewing practice? And they don't have to be your kids. They can be your godkids or your nieces and nephews,
neighbors,
or your grandkids, neighbors, however that makes sense for you. But tell us how you bring them into your sewing practice.
I need all the ideas I can get.
Definitely. And I know my mom is listening to this with great interest because before the pandemic, my little cousin, who's around 7, I think, asked her to teach her how to sew. And my mom had it all planned out. She borrowed an extra machine from me. She had it all set up. And then the pandemic hit and that was completely scuttled. But I know that she's looking forward to the day when she can pick that back up again. So any advice that you have for us and my mom, please share it with us.
Indeed. Well, that was a fun episode.
Yeah.
It was. It's not something I think about very often, not having kids.
Yeah,
but
same.
It was interesting to think about. And that little trip down memory lane.
All right. Well, until next time, you guys.
Yeah. Happy stitching.
Have a nice weekend. Yeah.
For links to everything we talked about in this episode, go to our show notes page at sewdaily.com/sewandtell. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at sewandtellpodcast@goldenpeakmedia.com or visit us on Instagram at sewandtellpod. Answer the Sew and Tell question, tell us your SewJo, or just leave us some feedback. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe on your podcasting platform of choice. And please leave us a review, ideally a good one, because that helps listeners like you find our podcast. And tell your sewing friends about us, too. Thanks for listening, and happy stitching. Sew and Tell is produced by Meg Healy, Amanda Carestio, and me, Kate Zaynard. Our consulting producer is Ron Doyle, and our executive producer is Jared Mayer.